oneself should be easy. At least, that's what everyone said. I have not found this to be so. I'll start with where I grew up. I grew up in Wollaston, a small community in the parish of Manchester, Jamaica, West Indies. I grew up with my grandparents, my aunts, uncles, and cousins. This is the family of my father. My father was in his early 20s at the time, so he had been in the early years of his career with the Jamaica Constabulary Force, or the JCF, which put him in a different parish from his family. So I was left to the care of his parents, his brothers and sisters at the family home. They took care of me like I was their own. My grandmother died when I was about 4 or 5 years old, old enough for me to remember that I loved her very much. Some of my family was already abroad, but we were a close-knit family, so they always came back to visit annually, especially my Auntie Joyce, who would be my future favorite. My 2 aunts, who were my primary caretakers, after my grandmother's death, migrated to the States with all of their children when I was about 6. At that time, I remember distinctly being very heartbroken because for the longest time, I couldn't understand why I was left behind. So now it was my grandfather, my 2 uncles, and myself, and a helper, which is a woman who was hired to live in and take care of the house. I liked her a lot. She was probably the only helper that I ever did really quick. My grandfather was my best friend, my biggest advocate and supporter. My grandfather would have moved heaven and earth for me if he could. In short, my wonderful grandpa was my everything. For as much as he loved me, I loved him even more. My uncles were my best friends. My Uncle Lincoln had a speaking deficiency, but I understood him, so I would often translate for him. I was also very defensive of him when anyone tried to laugh or make fun of him. My other uncle, called Masranal, always had an ear for my mouthful and always had answers for my 1,000,001 questions. I was a star pupil at school. Every grade, I was first in the class. Each time I started a new grade, I was put in the grade ahead and tried out for 1 or 2 weeks, but I was never skipped. I still to this day wondered how come. I left Jamaica when I was 11 and came here to my aunt. I was sad to leave my uncles behind, but I was excited to be reunited with my aunt and cousins. My grandfather was here on an extended stay. I remember because he had become senile 2 years prior and was sent for by my aunt. I was happy to come and see if he was better, which he was, but he was not the same. I attended junior high and high school here. Needless to say, I went from the star pupil to a has the potential but lacks effort. My grades went up and down with my moods. I excelled when I felt like it, or really when it counted, or other times I just never bothered to show up for class or even school. I was a teenager that did whatever I felt like. I never followed rules simply because I felt like they never applied to me. I did all kinds of odd jobs to earn money just so I never had to ask my aunts for anything. I moved around a lot, preferring to stay where I had the most freedom, which happened not to be with my family. At 18, I left home altogether as soon as I graduated high school. I stayed with friends for 1 year, at which time I worked as a dispatcher for a car service. At 19, I worked as a server in a diner. I then moved into my own apartment, which was short-lived because the desire to make your own rules came at a price. $600 a month. And without a deeper understanding of what it is to be an adult, I went from one bad decision to the next. Shortly before I turned 20, I moved back home with my Aunt Joy. Regrouped and started again was the plan. I had my son when I was 21. Still had not gone to college or decided on a career. Thus numerous circumstances beyond my control, I obviously survived with my bouncing baby boy, turning, smiling at me. And so I have entered a new phase of my life. I'm very happy to be alive. I currently work for the Eatery Salon at the Carlisle Hotel, where I am an aspiring beauty professional. I enjoy my line of work. It has an immediate reward. It has its immediate rewards when you can enable people to feel beautiful. My long-term goals are to eventually work with women and children, providing them with the resources and information that will effectively help them towards their long-term goals. If a woman is affected negatively, so will her children, and the cycle will never stop.